Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2021-22 season. My name is Dan and welcome to a Game Week 31 episode of Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid. Get the merch in the description. Guys, we are going to be going through all kinds of players this game week. I know it's a double game week, but we're not going to be focusing too much on double game week players. If you want to go check that out, then that was yesterday's video. Today we're going to kind of focus on some other players, mostly. But yeah, usual kind of stuff today. We'll go through the rules in a second. But if you do enjoy this video, please do make sure you leave a like. Please do make sure you subscribe if you're new around here. But without further ado, let's have a look at those rules of the video. So buys are players you probably don't have but should consider bringing in. Sells are players you probably have but should consider removing. Keeps are players that you might be thinking about removing. I think you should keep them. And avoids are players that are pretty hyped up right now, but I actually think they are potential traps that should be avoided this game week. So there you go, guys. 4 categories, 2 players from each. Let's start you off with some buys. So our first buy is CANCELO. Those of you guys who previously sold CANCELO, now is a really good time to get him back into your team. So Liverpool in Game Week 32 is actually really the only last test that City are going to have to face between now and the end of the season. And even that game, I think, could be cagey and low scoring as both teams desperately will just not want to lose. All of the other games should be really easy for City, particularly from a defensive point of view. So I'm expecting a hell of a lot of clean sheets from City defenders. Now, CANCELO is going to be most likely nailed to start on all of the rest of the Premier League games. Before Liverpool started to mount a serious title challenge, I would have maybe predicted 1 or 2 Premier League rests for CANCELO, just so City can maybe focus more on the Champions League, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think if there's one thing we've kind of seen from CANCELO this season is that I don't think we can call him a rotation risk anymore at all. He's kind of arguably City's most nailed on player outside of Ederson. I mean, maybe you'd put KDB in a similar bracket to CANCELO. And then we have his attacking threat as well. So CANCELO, one of the most creative players in his team. He loves to take a shot on as well. And he just always looks like he could potentially get a goal return and a monster score. He's already got 6 10-plus pointer hauls this season. But as we kind of saw in the 0-0 game versus Palace in Game Week 29, because he makes so many great attacking actions, whether that's dribbles, passes, moving the ball forwards or taking good shots on, even when he doesn't get a goal contribution, a clean sheet is usually enough to actually get him all of the bonus points, or at least some of the bonus points. So I definitely think he's the best City player to go for right now. It looks like Trent is going to be out for a little while longer. So if you did want to sell Trent, maybe CANCELO would be my favourite replacement, followed by Robertson and then Reece James. But I'll kind of leave this down to you, whether you're selling Trent or not. I mean, some people might say they actually would quite like to keep Trent and just leave him on the bench even if he's not going to be available for a couple of more game weeks. But yeah, CANCELO, he would be my top transfer target this week, and I think he could score very big against Burnley. The next buy is Kai Havertz. I was kind of considering putting Reece James in here, but 1, we don't know for certain if James is going to be available. It does look pretty likely since he is back in training though. 2, I didn't really want to include 2 defenders as buys because, that's kind of a little bit boring. We like to mix things up a little bit. But, what I would say is that I'm very keen to get on some Chelsea players, get some Chelsea players in my own personal fantasy team right now. Havertz is the player I would go for in terms of their attackers, mostly down to his great form that he is showing. We always knew he was a great player, but since coming to England, he has really kind of struggled for consistency, and I think that's kind of been a source of frustration for FPL managers who are perhaps still unwilling to put their faith in him. But 4 goals and an assist in his last 3 Premier League games, it finally seems like he has become that striker that Chelsea have been desperately searching for. And even if he hasn't completely frozen out Lukaku, like kind of out the team, he can also play on either side of the central striker as well, can't he? So I just think out of the forwards, out of the attackers for Chelsea, I would say that he is top of the pecking order right now. And whisper it quietly, guys, but I do include Mount in that. The only problem at Chelsea is things can change very, very quickly. And the rotation has been an absolute nightmare to deal with under Tuchel, hasn't it, for us FPL managers anyway. So I guess what we really hope is that when Havertz does play, and I hope that will be 80% of the games between now and the end of the season, the points that he scores will be enough to make up for the 20% of games where he is either benched or just kind of omitted completely. Any Chelsea player is a risk, particularly when they remain in other competitions, but that's why you get these premium players like Havertz for a non-premium price. And if you're feeling extra spicy and like the look of Chelsea's great run of fixtures between now and the end of the season, which will also, guys, include 2 double game weeks, Chelsea are going to have 2 double game weeks somewhere down the line this season, then Havertz could be the midfielder for you. On to some sells, start you off with Coutinho. Midfielders, I'm sure we will all kind of agree, are kind of the most valuable position in the game right now. I'm sure we all wish we could have, 6 or 7 midfielders and field all of them. Unfortunately, that's not possible, but if only we could sacrifice some strikers, some forwards for some more midfielders, right? Not possible. And as such, we have to be really particular, really fussy when it comes to our midfielders and almost be extra harsh on them. Coutinho is a great player, don't get me wrong, but is he good enough to keep, or you want to keep him through an away game against Wolves, one of the best defences in the league, I'm sure you'd agree. Spurs, where honestly, you never know what you're going to get really from them. There's a blank in 33. Now, I know you could say, maybe just sell him in 33 or free hit him out in Gameweek 33. But if we kind of look at these patterns of Coutinho's high scores, you can see that from his 9 starts, he's only returned in 3 games. Those 3 games were a home game against Southampton and 2 games against Leeds. All games of even minor difficulty have seemed to be a bit of a problem for not just Aston Villa, but Coutinho as well, like both. So although he has had a few huge scores, he's also had quite a lot of blanks. And it seems like he's kind of a little bit of an all or nothing player, a real hot or cold player. And I wonder if he's the kind of player we might want to target for the easier games rather than for the harder games. Like, the last few games against Arsenal and West Ham, those were the last 2 games that he played it in. He hasn't really put up the numbers we kind of hoped from him. 2 shots per game over the last 2, only 1 shot on target per game. And really surprisingly, only 1 chance created per game. So like I said, with midfielders, we kind of have to demand a little bit more because the points we can miss out on, not by, just by not hopping onto another really nice midfielder. That could be a big factor here as well. It's not just, do we think Coutinho is going to be bad? It's kind of about, are we going to be really missing out on some other potential midfielders to really go on to do some big things? So, all that said, I don't dislike Coutinho, and I think we may want to bring him back or, one of his Villa teammates back at a later stage in the season. Villa could have a really nice double game week in Game Week 35 and another in Game Week 36. Maybe that's going to be the time to bring Coutinho back in, but right now, it's difficult to make a strong case for keeping him with the difficult games and then the blank and his hot and cold performances. I don't know about them. I think we can do a little bit better, and I think we can actually afford to sacrifice Coutinho, at least for a little while. The next sell is Raul Jiménez. So, I'm going to go for Raul Jiménez as my second sell. Maybe this is a little bit of a lazy one from me, but it's just, I did kind of want to talk about him a little bit. So, if you are a Jiménez owner right now, you might not need me to tell you that he's probably a good sell, right? But at the same time, I know a lot of you guys do have him, and I just want to give you the confidence that he is potentially a priority sell this week, as well as giving you some potential options to replace him with. So, that's kind of why I want to talk about Jiménez, even though he's kind of an obvious sell, right? And I try not to do things that are too obvious, I suppose. But yeah, due to the fact that Game Week 30 was his second red card of the season, this means he misses 2 games due to suspension. So he won't feature in Game Week 31 versus Villa, 32 versus Newcastle, and then, guess what? It's a blank in 33 anyway. So he won't play a single game until 34, which is almost a month from now. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to, suggest the least terrible of the forward options you can replace him with. So my number 1 forward pick is still Kane. I know that's going to be a real difficult challenge to try and afford Kane for your teams. So there are some other options. Maybe you can go for, look, the other options are not as good as Kane. We can't expect them to be as good as Kane. They're not even as good as some of the midfielders or defender options. The midfielder and defender options are just better. But we can go for some that look okay. So for starters, Mateta at Crystal Palace. He's a player I kind of like because of he's got this extremely cheap price and he's playing a lot and he's playing well for Palace. I think if we're accepting that we don't want to spend much money in forwards, if we're just accepting that all forwards are bad, we may as well just go for a cheap player. Mateta is the obvious solution. He's kind of cheap, benchable, a possible double game week in 36, and he's actually getting the odd return as well. He's not setting the world alight, but he doesn't need to set the world alight at 5.2 million, and that's kind of the point. We've also got WEGHORST, I suppose, who is due to have 3 double game weeks, well, a maximum of 3 double game weeks in the next 5. So every other week could be a double from here on for WEGHORST, just over the next 5 game weeks. It could be really, really good. But manage your expectations for goal returns, as he hasn't looked great since his first few Burnley games. But at least he's nailed. He should be good for 4 points at a minimum over the doubles. I know 4 points doesn't seem like a lot, but for a forward whose name is not Harry Kane, 4 points in a game is pretty much the best you can expect anyway. And finally, you can just, if you just want to forget about forwards completely and go for someone super, super cheap, maybe Joe Gelhardt at Leeds could be the solution. 4.6 million. He could get some game time with Bamford out, and ultimately, you can just leave him on your bench and rely on the better positions in your team, taking all of the money out of your forwards. It could kind of allow you to reinvest some of that money in some nice premium defenders maybe, or upgrade some of your midfielders as well. And, those are the kind of the players that I think are going to get you the points. Defenders and midfielders. They're the most important positions at the moment. So kind of aside from those players that I kind of just mentioned, you are kind of really rolling the dice, and it's very difficult for me to make some really good suggestions. So I'm not really sure who to suggest outside of those 4 players I just mentioned, and they all have different advantages, and maybe one of them, strikes a chord with you and you like the look of one of them, I suppose. But yeah, as for other Wolves players, other players from the Wolves team, I think they are all optional sells. I think if you have a Cody or a Seiss or a Neves, for some reason, I think they're all fine to sell as the next 2 games. I don't think they're going to be as easy as they look for Wolves, to be honest. So yeah. Wolves players, Jimenez, all possible sells. On to some keeps. We'll start you off with RAPHINHA. So Villa and Wolves both blank in 33, which makes their players pretty easy sells at the moment. But RAPHINHA, even though he blanks in 33 as well, I don't know, I feel like versus an out-of-sorts Southampton at home and then a Watford away in the next one too, I think you can actually keep RAPHINHA in your team. That win against Wolves in game week 30 would have been a real confidence booster for Leeds, and I think it could propel them onto more good results, particularly in terms of goal scoring. Now, obviously, RAPHINHA did not feature in that game, in game week 30, due to a bout of COVID-19, but you get that feeling that if he was playing in that game, he could have got something out of it. He has got both a goal and an assist in his last 5 game weeks, despite some really difficult games against teams like United, Liverpool and Spurs. His underlying stats actually look pretty decent, and if you look at his expected goals of 1.72 and his expected assists of 1.63, along with his high volume of shots and key passes, particularly in those dangerous areas, you can see that he's perhaps underperforming, and hopefully we can see a little bit more from him. It's very clear that he's a good player. He's certainly one of my favourite players to have broken through in the last 2 seasons. I really like RAPHINHA. He's just a joy to watch, right, guys? And even if he isn't going to stay at Leeds in the summer, he will be wanting to show that he is worth a big summer move away, off to a big team. So these next 2 easy games should give him a real platform to do that in this new look Leeds team, and it just seems to be full of positivity right there at Leeds, doesn't it? And I can easily see him getting a couple of returns before game week 33 where he blanks. So maybe you can consider selling him there in game week 33. Maybe you can even consider free hitting him out or benching him after the next 2 games, depending on how he does. My next keep is Wout Weghorst. Right, hear me out. I did a whole video yesterday on Burnley and Everton players and whether they're worth buying. If you want to go watch that and get the full rundown, go for it. If not, I'll save you some time and say there isn't really any Burnley or Everton players that I'd be desperate to buy. There's certainly, they're not going to be priority transfers in. They're pretty luxury moves to bring in, I think. But I have also noticed that a lot of people are thinking about selling their Burnley players that they've kind of have left over from previous times. And I wanted to use this section of the video to say, you've got to keep those Burnley players, guys. You've got to keep them. Burnley have a double game week in 31, 33, and are likely to have a further double game week in 35. So that would be 3 double game weeks and 8 fixtures within the space of 5 game weeks. Even if you think some of their players are crap, because these players, because they're going to be playing kind of almost twice as often as some of your other players, they only need to be half as good as your other players to get the same output. Players like Weghorst and Cornet, they're surely going to get a few goal contributions between them in 8 games during 5 game weeks. Players like Pope and Connor Roberts, they're surely going to get a couple of clean sheets, especially when Mia's back, over such a large quantity of games in a short period of time. Burnley, they're going to be playing at full strength since they have to win these games to survive. There will be minimal rotation. In individual games, I agree, There's probably not going to be any mega hauls. These are not players that are going to get you mega hauls, right? But when all of the points just for playing are added together, along with the odd return, these Burnley players should genuinely provide value for money given their cheap prices, and should, in theory, match or even better those players at a similar price. And that is the power of the double game week and having so many of those double game weeks in a short period of time. After Burnley have played their second or third double game week, then yeah, absolutely sell those assets. But I don't know if we can do too much better in these price brackets right now. After, maybe, but not right now. Even if you want to use them as first bench options, you know, I just think keep your Weghorsts, your Cornets, Tarkowskis, Roberts, and your Popes. I'm not saying buy them. If you want to do that, if you want to buy them, that's on you. But definitely don't be selling them. And finally, some avoids. We'll start you off with Richarlison, the less controversial of the two, I think, I hope. Right, this one, guys, is a little bit different. A lot of people are looking to get Richarlison or a DCL in their team. All I can say is I hope you like pain. Everton are barely creating any chances whatsoever. None of their players look like major goal threats other than, you know, the odd opportunity for Gordon. So spending an insane 7.5 million plus on an Everton striker, it just sounds so ridiculous right now. That is just, you know, so expensive for, you know, when we look at DCL and we look at Richarlison. Those two players, they have 2 goals between them since Game Week 3. Jesus Christ, that cannot be right, surely. 2 goals between them since Game Week 3. Wow. Look, I know it kind of looks like I'm singling out Richarlison for the sake of the avoid, you know, on screen right now, since he is the more popular pick of the two. But honestly, don't do this to yourself, guys. I know Everton have a double game week now, but their last remaining 2 double game weeks, they could be as late as Game Week 36 and 37. So you would be buying them essentially just for one double game week, because the other double game weeks are going to be quite far in the future. It's not like they have a load now like those Burnley players. And as such, they don't have the same benefits of you know, picking from Burnley. And yet Everton players in general are actually a little bit more expensive than Burnley players too. You know, when we look at Richarlison and DCL, they're both 1 million plus, over 1 million, more expensive than a Weghorst, you know, and you're getting the same amount for it and less double game weeks. It doesn't make any sense. Yes, we kind of saw a little bit of hope when Everton beat Newcastle 1-0, but then in the FA Cup immediately after that, Everton lose to Crystal Palace 4-0. So things are looking seriously worrying for Everton. I don't really trust this Lampard ball at all. Like I said, if you want a full rundown on these Everton and Burnley players, check out yesterday's video. But as a quick summary, the only 2 Everton players I'd even remotely consider are Gordon and Pickford. And that's only because of their really low prices and their bench ability as well. The rest of those Everton players can honestly get in the bin. And talking of bins, I might be about to get in the bin because it's time for my controversial avoid of the week. And it is Dejan Kulusevski. You know, perhaps this is a bit of a controversial one. I kind of accept that. But I think the ship has potentially sailed on this particular buy. If you were going to buy Kulusevski, the last 3 game weeks were the time to do it. At this point, if you don't already have him, I would definitely be shifting my focus onto some other midfield options and looking for the next big thing. I don't think Kulusevski is a sell, don't get me wrong. I just don't think I would actually buy him anymore at this game week. And considering he's one of the most popular players being brought in this week, I thought I would include him as an avoid. To be honest, I don't think there's too much reason to heavily invest in Spurs anymore. Kane and Son are obviously very good. Doherty is decent value for money, but isn't even the best defensive option right now when you consider how well all of the premiums are doing. And you kind of look at these next fixtures for Spurs and you just kind of think, meh, they're kind of average, right? Newcastle, I feel like it's going to be a difficult game for Spurs, knowing Spurs and their Spursy ways. I think that could actually cause them some trouble. Villa, they're in good form at the moment. That could be another banana skin. Game Week 33 is against Brighton, who have been in bad form, but, you know, maybe they'll turn it around by that point. I don't really want to speculate on that one, to be honest, so we'll keep that as a green fixture for now. But Game Week 33, anyway, that's a week where we're actually going to see a lot of double game weeks, a lot of players with double game weeks, and Spurs are not going to have a double game week there. So it kind of, you know, your kind of lower price players, your lower price midfielders, maybe who aren't, you aren't your premium ones, you're going to want to have double game week players probably in these kind of slots, in the KULUSEVSKI type slot in game week 33. So would you even be playing him in 33? I don't know. Yeah, not sure. And when Spurs do eventually get their double game week, which is probably going to be in game week 36 or game week 37, most likely 36. If it is in 36, for example, it would be a double game week against Liverpool and Arsenal. Now, fair enough, you might back players like Kane or Son in these tough fixtures, but anyone outside that, you probably wouldn't actually be too keen to play, even in a double game week, unless, of course, you're bench boosting. So the immediate fixtures are kind of meh. Decent doubles are kind of unlikely, and a Champions League place is kind of looking like a pipe dream this year, so they might actually find themselves on the beach pretty soon. Overall, I'm just finding it difficult to find a reason to go hard on Spurs players right now, and I think I'm going to actually start shifting a few of them out of my own personal FPL team myself. So, maybe not immediately, but, you know, in the near future. So as for buying these Spurs players, with the obvious exception of Harry Kane, I think I would rather look to try and buy the next big thing and try and figure out the next big thing rather than buying Spurs players at this point. I think that ship has sailed, with the exception of Kane and maybe Son. So in summary, Cancelo, Robertson, Reece James, they are your top defensive targets. I can see these guys doing really well in the upcoming game weeks. Havertz looks like a nice risky buy, I suppose. I wouldn't focus too much on buying Burnley and Everton players. They're probably not going to outscore too many of the main FPL template assets who play single game weeks. And Aston Villa and Wolves players, they could easily make way in your teams if you are looking to sell someone. As always, forwards are a real problem area to an extent where you may as well just give up and buy someone cheap, pretty much. Definitely don't fall into the traps of Richarlison or DCL, unless, of course, you are a sadist, in which case, carry on. And that is the end of Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid. We have got 100 experts tomorrow. We have got team selection on Thursday. And then on Friday, I don't know what I'm going to do yet. So we will see about that. I did a video on Everton and Burnley players yesterday, as I keep mentioning. Do go check that out if you do want to get the lowdown, particularly on the statistics and who is actually doing well and not doing well from Everton and Burnley in the underlying stats. That's always nice to have a look at. Yeah, go check that out. Aside from that, guys, if you wouldn't mind liking the video, massively helps out the channel. Do subscribe if you're new around here. And I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.